Do you have baskets or bins or bags of little scraps like this that are too precious to throw away, but you're not sure what to do with? Well, today we are going to take scraps like that and turn them into adorable little mini quilts for your Christmas tree. Now, I suppose they could be coasters too, but we're going to add hanging loops and make them into ornaments. Perfect for gift giving or for your own tree. And the best part, there's no hand sewing needed for any part of this process, even though they're beautifully finished. All right, for this first sample, we're going to make an ornament like this, which takes advantage of a focus fabric or fussy cut if you prefer. Now for this, I want to use this motif right here, and I want to cut a 3.5-inch square. Now I happen to have a 3.5-inch square ruler, which is perfect, but if you don't, you can take a bigger ruler like this and then use tape to isolate the 3.5-inch lines so that it'll be easy to lay on your fabric and figure out how you want to cut your piece out. Since I do have this size, I'm going to use this one. And I have put a loop of painter's tape on the back to prevent it from slipping. So I'm going to lay this on here and I'm going to center this as best I can. And I'm also going to watch out for cuts in the fabric from previous samples. So I could cut it out just like that. All right. And then the nice part about having the tape on the bottom is that that makes it easy to just swing it around and cut all four sides without having to stand on my head to get the cuts. So here we go. There's our piece. Now you could also cut them on the diagonal if you want to. That works out well too. I like a variety. All right. So once we have those squares cut out, as many as you want, then we're going to take the fabric that's going to be our border/faux binding. And so for this, I've cut pieces that are 1 inch wide. Now I'm going to tell you the measurements as I go, but if you're in my Quilting Friends membership, you can download a printable that has all the measurements on it. So we're going to sew first the two sides, okay? And then after those two sides are sewn on, we're going to have something like this. There's the first two sides. Then we're going to sew the second two sides like that and that. And then open it up like this. And I want to give you a quick, I had it sideways. There we go. We're going to open it up like this. I want to give you a quick tip when you're pressing these. The tendency is to take your iron and just go like this. But what often happens when you do that is this seam starts to bow a little bit. You're actually going to be probably a little more accurate if you go like this and then with your iron, just go right along the seam so that you're working with the grain of the fabric. Now I'm using my finger so that it's easier for you to see. All right, but you would just use the iron like that. And there's our ornament front. All right, now we're going to stop right here because we've got some other ones to prep. But here's one that's just the next stage where I've taken this one is on the diagonal. So I've taken the block like this and I've ironed it to a piece of Thermolam. And this is Thermolam that was left over from when I made my design boards. So I just took my leftover bits and cut them into 4.5-inch squares. And this is nice because it's actually fusible on one side. It's a fusible fleece. It's a little thicker than 987F. It has a little bit more body and it's fusible on one side, so it's scratchy. So you put this down onto the scratchy side and then with your iron, press it and you get this. All right. And this is where we'll stop and talk about our next design. We will come back to this. The next one we're going to do is a 4-patch design. So for this, we want 4 squares, each 2 inches square. And then we're going to sew these 2 pieces and these 2 pieces together. And when I'm at the sewing machine, I'm doing it here so you can see, but when I'm at the sewing machine, I finger press this. And what I want is for the seam allowance to go towards the darker fabric. So I'm just going to give it a little tug, and I'm using the pad of my finger, not my fingernail, to just go like that. Okay. So there's the first 2 pieces. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flip this over so the seam allowance is going towards the darker fabric. Just like that. There. And by doing that, I can then nest these seams. Can you see? We're going to nest those seams, line them up, so you can kind of feel them lock into place. And if you peel this back, you can see that that seam is going to match. All right. So then we're going to take that to the machine and just sew right down that edge. And then this is like a cooking show where you pull it out of the oven. It's magically done. Here we go. Here's our little 4-patch. Now this time I pressed that seam open just to reduce the bulk. That just makes it lie a little bit flatter. So there's our little 4-patch. And then I'm going to do the same thing as before. I have 1-inch strips, and I'm going to sew 1 to each side. And then after that's sewn, I'm going to sew 1 to the top and the bottom. These don't look like they're going to fit. That's because this hasn't been sewn yet. Once these are sewn, those are going to fit perfectly. And then here we go. This is our second little ornament top. Now, this looks really heavy and thick right now, but that's because we're going to lose half of it when we make our faux binding. So don't worry about how white that is. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Easy peasy. And we're going to look at one more design. Now we're going to look at 9 patches. And you can make the 9 patch with just 2 fabrics. You can mix it up and do 3 fabrics. You could have every single square different if you want to. Here I have 2 fabrics. And because my little hearts are directional, I do have them all facing the same way. And when you sew this, you're going to do just like the 4-patch. You're going to sew these 2 together, and then these 2, and then these 2, and press the seams towards the red. Then sew this one, and this one, pressing the seams towards the red. And then your seams will nest when you join it like this. All right. And then the next thing is to add that 1-inch border around the outside, just like we did for the other ones. You see how fast this goes? It's really fun. And probably you're recognizing these fabrics. These fabrics are leftovers from the Christmas tree videos that I did. So you'll have to check those out if you're interested. So now we have some fronts for our ornaments, sewn and pressed. And now we're going to lay them on top of, I'm using Thermolam, but you can be using felts. You can use other fusible fleece. You can use fusible batting. You can use regular batting. The only thing I would avoid is a puffy, slippery polyester batting, because that's going to make the next step harder. But if you choose something that's pretty flat like this and fairly dense, that's going to be much easier to sew. So we're going to fuse it. I'm not going to press this now because I'm going to do the magic thing. And here's one that is pressed. This one happens to be on the diagonal. And once you have it pressed, and if you're not using something fusible, that's fine. You can just use a couple pins if you need to, or even a little bit of a fabric glue stick would work. And we're ready to add the backing fabric. Now, for the back, you'll need 2 pieces that are each 4 inches by 4.5 inches. And you need 2 pieces for each ornament because we're actually going to create a lapped back. And that's what makes it so we don't have to leave an opening on the outside seam, which is what you usually see in handmade ornaments. And then you have to hand sew that shut. But we don't have to do that. We're going to have a perfect finished edge all the way around without hand sewing. So we'll take these 2 pieces and then take them to our ironing board. Now I've already done this so that you can see, and just, you can eyeball this. I've done just a generous 1/4 inch. Press that over and then press it over one more time. We'll get that little string out of there. Press it over one more time, and that creates a hem on this one edge, just that one edge. Then you can just take it to your sewing machine and sew right down that edge to keep it from coming undone. So then do that for both of them. So then you have 2 pieces that look like this. All right, this is from the back and this is from the front. Okay, then we're going to take this little guy. We want to assemble it right sides together. So then I'm going to take my first backing piece, and I like to always have the first one go on with the hem at the bottom. So I'm going to line this up here at the top. All right, just like that. Then I'm going to take this piece and have it going in the opposite direction. Line it up on the bottom. This is just like an envelope style pillow. That's exactly what it is. So here we go. Now you can put a couple of pins in there if you want to. Because I have an extension table on my machine, I find it just as easy to just flip this over without any pins. And I'm going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm actually going to sew it twice. So here's one that's been stitched, and I sewed all the way around twice just to really reinforce it, because we are going to be pulling on that quite firmly. So we want it to be really strong. And so that's why I've sewn it twice. Then the next step is to trim off some of this bulk at the corners. Now you can use scissors for that, or if you're really brave, you can come in with your rotary cutter like that. And you can see I've just removed some of the bulk. The important thing is not to get too close to the stitches. You know, that's pretty close. It's at least a few threads away, probably about 3 threads away from my corner. Just take that bulk out so that you'll be able to turn it and not have a huge lump in the corner. I'm going to take a little bit more there. And then here. All right. So there we go. And then the next step is to just turn this right side out. And I have one, of course, that's already turned right side out. So here it is. And I strongly advise having something like a chopstick. You don't want anything that's too sharp and too pointed. You know, just have something like a chopstick where you can go right in like that and poke those corners out. And you'll have to get underneath the fabric there and poke those corners out, and use the chopstick to kind of stroke the sides as well. And you can also use your fingers to kind of rock back and forth on those side seams to make sure that you don't have any pleats in the fabric here. You want it all the way poked out. All right. And so when I'm making these, I like to get a bunch of them to this step, and then I'm almost done. All right. We're going to do one more thing to make this really look like binding. So here we have our pile O ornaments, And I want to show you what to do next. Now, do you see how right now, this is pretty loose on the back. Press it flat with your iron, a hot, dry iron. Press it nice and flat. But we want to attach this and also give it a little bit more body. Now, there is still going to be, this little pocket back there. It will stay closed enough that you can go ahead and use it as an ornament. If you want to, you could put a little bit of heat and bond or steam or something in there and fuse that shut. I actually just don't worry about it. But here we go. And what we're going to do is take this to the sewing machine and put some blending thread, like a fine, for this fabric, I'd use a really fine light gray thread or even a cream. Monofilament thread is a good option, and stitch right in the ditch all the way around. Okay, just like that. So all these others have been stitched already. This is the only one that hasn't been stitched yet. And if I kind of push this back, can you see the imprint where that stitching is? Right in the ditch here. So it's on this base fabric. It's not on the faux binding. It's right next to the faux binding. And what that does is it makes this faux binding really kind of puff a little bit, and it looks for all the world like you did a traditional quilt binding on your little mini quilt. It's a really nice finish, and it holds the back shut. All right, easy peasy. We're almost done. We're ready to add our hanging loops. Now I'm going to show you a really cool trick for getting cord like this, or metallic cord like this, or embroidery floss, or whatever it is that you want to use, and getting it easily through the eye of your needle. Now, first of all, we're not using a regular small hand needle. We're actually using a yarn darner or a chenille needle. Works equally well, or a tapestry needle. You just want something that has a large eye like that. Now, even though it has a large eye, sometimes it can be tricky to get this through there, especially if your hands shake a little bit, like sometimes mine do. Now, I normally use Scotch tape for this, but I'm going to try to do it with painter's tape because I think the blue will show up better on camera. So I'm just taking a little piece of tape and I'm going to lay my cord, the end of my cord on there, and then I'm going to close the tape over it. And then you can use scissors or a rotary cutter to make kind of like an arrow. There, can you see there's kind of an arrow shape there? Now that arrow shape, actually I want to make it a little bit narrower. Okay, there we go. So now we have this little arrow shape. Now the arrow shape, because it has that nice sharp point, is very easy to get right through the needle. Just pop it through, just like that. Here's one that I did earlier with Scotch tape. And again, that point makes this metallic cord go through the eye of the needle just as easy as you can think. Just like that. Boom. No problem. So now I have my cord threaded onto my needle, and I'm going to take one of my ornaments. Now this one very definitely has a direction. So that's the top, that's the bottom. And here is the middle. I can tell because that's where that seam is. So I'm just going to kind of use my fingernail to mark where that is. Okay, so there's the middle. So I want to go through right there on the back to create my little hanging loop. All right, that's kind of wide. We don't need it quite that wide. So there we go. I'm just going to check. That looks pretty good. Okay. And I'm going to pull this. And, sometimes you kind of have to rock that needle a little bit because it's so thick, especially when it's got 2 layers of cord to go through. So there we go. So there we did it. All right. And then I'm just going to do a knot where I wrap it around my finger and then tuck the ends through the loop. So there it is. And then I'm going to work that knot towards the end. Pull it tight. All right. There we go. It is ready to hang. Isn't that cute? Now you would do the same thing on the ones that are on the diagonal. Just for on the diagonal, you'd go through the tip, of course. All right, and there we go. And there's other ways to hang it. You can use ribbon, you can do twine, you can do whatever you like. I like this thin gold cord. I'm happy with that. But I've done others where I have used some of these other metallic cords and ribbons too. So whatever you like. But isn't that cute? So fun, so easy. We have tiny quilted ornaments, little mini quilts that make perfect gifts and wonderful keepsakes, and they're all made from your scrap bin. They're quick, they're budget friendly, and they're so satisfying to make, and you can make a whole bunch in an afternoon. They make great gifts for friends, family, teachers, and, wonderful keepsakes for your family too. I hope you'll give them a try and share with me what you make. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, I'd love for you to subscribe. I do post new quilting videos just about every week. And remember, if you are in the membership, there is a free printable with all of the measurements that you need for this. I hope you enjoy it, everybody. Happy quilting.